morning, everybody. I'm Anseeuw and work for the University of Pretoria in Anseeuw, and I've been asked here to present the results of a study we conducted for the LPI, the Land Policy Initiative. It was an African assessment on large-scale land-based investments, and for the sake of this presentation, I'll combine it to a bit of global statistics. I'm waiting for the presentation to be uploaded. Perfect, thank you. So I will have two sections in my presentation. A first one on more quantification of large-scale land acquisition. It's a work that I've been engaged in based on data from the land matrix. And then a second session, which will be a bit shorter, on the implication, trends, and practices we're seeing now, and which is more qualitative and based on a broad literature review and desk study we've done for this LPI project. So first section, what are we talking about? How much is it? Where, etc. What we see at this stage is that we're talking about 70 million hectares, out of which about covering about 870 deals that are concluded, about 186 that are still under negotiation, and about 74 now that are failed. In total, if you calculate the intended hectares of these deals, it is about 70 million hectares. It's much lower than what we used to talk about when, for example, the land matrix was established in 2002. We spoke about, depending what we were taking into consideration, but plus minus 200 million, which included the announcements. Here in this, we talk only about concluded deals, intentions, which imply effective negotiations, whether signed, oral, or written, and then the deals that have been signed but collapsed at the end. So these are the effective deals. So it's much lower, 70 million hectares. That's a figure we've been working with for the last year, 18 months now. Then much lower than what it used to be. However, it is still steadily increasing. Since the complete version of the land matrix about a year ago, we see that in concluded deals it has increased by 115, 41 and for the intended deals, and 24 for the failed deals in cases. Where are these deals? At the moment, still mainly in Africa, especially when we consider the intentions and the sizes of these deals. It's the first graph. Africa almost double than Asia. However, when we look at the concluded deals, and especially a number of deals, this point here, we're not too far from Africa and Asia. So at Africa and Asia, the structure and the nature of these deals are totally different, which leads to different hectares, but in a number of cases, they are quite close now, presently. This concentration is also seen not only per continent, but also per country. And we see specific countries mushrooming like Indonesia, Cambodia, Mozambique, Ethiopia, Tanzania, etc. These deals in number of hectares, but also in number of cases. And actually, the top 20 countries group about 74% of the cases, or even 80% of the sizes of these investments. However, although we see Indonesia, Cambodia mushrooming there, out of the first 20, 9 are African countries. So Africa is still very much present also on a country level. In Africa, where are these investments taking place? Two regions are popping out. It is East Africa, especially Sudan, South Sudan integrated in East Africa, and West Africa. Here again, the number of deals and the hectares are quite similar. We're talking about 10 million hectares concluded and 6 million hectares concluded in these two regions. So a concentration per continent, a concentration per country. Here are the countries in Africa. South Sudan and Sudan are very prominent here. However, the green bars are unknown, with unknown specificities there. So if you take them out, it can change quite quickly, the configurations of acquisitions on the continent per country. Mozambique, very present, Ethiopian, Tanzania too. A very interesting country is the DRC, where we see quite high in hectares, very low in number of projects. However, it is a yellow bar, means in operation, and it's a country where the most activities are in operation in the DRC. That is linked to the nature of it because it's mainly based on forestry concessions, so not really agriculture. Concentration per continent, per country, but also per region, and the quality of the data we're gathering now can leads us to, or enables us to use GIS coordinates, etc., and start developing maps. And what we see here is that the concentration of these deals is also per region or per characterization. Like here, it is related to the water. Nile Basin, we see that along the Nile, all the land has been invested in. This is the Niger Basin, and we see a similar tendency. We can also do the same exercise, I haven't got the slides here, but related to markets or infrastructure. So the rhetoric of investors coming into Africa and investing in marginal lands where there's nobody living or where very few activities are ongoing, these data, the new data, is questioning this rhetoric, and we see a concentration according to water, according to certain other natural resources or infrastructure. These are probably all things you've seen from our works and from the works you've all done. Some new tendencies that are popping up now. First of all, about the investors themselves. We talk a lot about China. Here we see again, China in number of deals is only in the 6th position. In number of hectares acquired is even not in the top 20 anymore. The main investors are the UK and the USA. So the more normal, would I say, or historic investors that are looking for an extension of their markets and a control of agricultural activities. Another group popping up are the emerging countries like South Korea, Arab Emirates, or Saudi Arabia, which are very prominent, but not to extend their markets, mainly to avoid commodity markets here and to integrate production offshore in their value chains. Another point where we see differences mushrooming at the moment is the sector invested in. Initially, a lot, or the announcement at least, were a lot focusing on biofuels, agrofuels. What we see now is that food crops is becoming the new, or the major sector invested in. So we see a shift from biofuels and renewed energy, etc., towards crop fuels. And the major reason for this is shown by this graph showing investments related to jatropha. And we see here jatropha in 2013 has almost totally disappeared. This is probably related to the European Union policies regarding biofuels and also the subsidies and the support some of the international corporations, European international corporations, have given to these jatropha investments in the years 2008, 2009, 2010. This is the same for Africa. We see in Africa, especially in the 3 first ones, food crops becoming the most important ones. Very important here, and I think this is the major not conclusion or message I want to give here, is we speak a lot, and we've seen a lot of the concluded deals are the major part of our cases. However, there is still very little production, even if the cases are concluded. What I've wanted to show here for Africa is that these are only the concluded parts, where we have the yellow bars is in operation, where officially production has been started. However, when we go and look the quantity of the production in hectares, it remains very little. It actually remains only 1.7% of the land acquired. So there is a tendency from these announcements and intentions toward concluding the deals at the moment. That's what we're seeing. However, the effective production on the ground remains only 1.7% of these acquisitions in size, in hectares. That means, for example, I can give you the case of the South Africans in Congo, for example. They have signed a contract for 80,000 hectares. They occupy at the moment 50,000 hectares. Out of these 50,000 hectares, there's only 1.5 approximately 1,000 hectares that is under full production. And it's this 1.5 hectares that is important to measure at the moment, and that's this 1.7%, to understand its the contribution of these investments to food security, etc. So what we're seeing, indeed, a decrease presently of these acquisitions with a peak in 2008, 2009 after the food price crisis, a decrease also linked to the less media attention probably, but a stabilization with more deals being concluded, but not per se leading to effective production. Second part, what do we see, the tendencies, etc. I'll do it very quickly. The new works we're seeing are long-term works, not only based on the figures, but also more qualitative and in-depth and longer-term analysis, see that we can't speak only about large-scale land acquisitions. It entails a huge variety of institutional setups that lead or can lead to different outcomes. I tend to speak about, 7 different deals, cases or models, from independent farmer up to nucleus estate models and agribusiness models, with the more speculative models in between. What we do see on the ground, and that's linked to the 1.7% I was speaking about, is that there's high failures, especially in the less integrated models that are presented here for several reasons, institutional reasons, technical reasons, etc. We see new practices, new strategies mushrooming at the moment. First of all, more integrated models are remaining, so those who are succeeding are the more integrated ones, or other strategies where we see, one, a shift to certain countries. We're talking about more stable countries here, like the emerging countries, South Africa. South Africa is now being affected, a couple of years it wasn't, but also Australia, Canada, where a lot of the foreign investments are now taking place. Also, other strategies and models where we where we see now more equity than direct land acquisition, equity in agribusinesses, etc. South Africa has been affected, for example, through the case of increased integration, which obviously leads to less inclusive models on the ground. It makes us say that we see major changes in our agricultural sectors in Africa. First of all, because these huge entities are the ones succeeding and remaining on the ground, we see a corporatization of agriculture, which is linked, in some cases, to a financialization of the sector. Because of their huge structures and their investment in the different segments of the value chain, we see more closed value chains appearing or mushrooming, where these huge entities, these corporates, have full control not only of the primary production, but mainly of the value chain, which obviously leads to concentration and dualization of the sector and a proletarization of our agricultural population, either becoming employees of these structures or rent seekers, or are totally marginalized from the agricultural sector. We see, however, some tendencies popping up on the African continent, and that's the last slide of the report. I'm not going to go to the recommendations because Sue is going to do that. But we see 6 instruments popping up in Africa. First, some countries are changing their policies and governance regarding investment, regarding land, regarding water use, etc. More transparency or some transparency initiatives. They might not be perfect, the case of Liberia shows it, but at least it's a step forward. Monitoring instruments being established, for example, the Land Observatory in Cameroon. There's one in Madagascar too, which existed prior to this phenomenon, but which contributes to the same. Some countries like South Africa, but also Ghana, have been challenging some investment protection regimes, so less protection for investors. We've seen development of inclusive instruments. We have a whole session on this, I think, tomorrow or this afternoon. And we also see better international and continental guidance with the guidelines of the FAO, but also the LPI has been developing them. These instruments are necessary, they have to be promoted, but they remain very limited. They remain limited in scope. Very few countries have implemented them. And they remain very limited in effect, where they are effectively implemented or are only voluntary or have very little enforcement, so with little success at the end. So there is, according to me, a need for these instruments, but there's also a danger we have to keep in mind that we legitimize these large-scale land acquisition as the sole model for agriculture investment on the continent and worldwide. And I come to my conclusion now, some concluding thoughts. And I'm also often asked, is there an agrarian change? Are we contributing to through these investments to agrarian change on the continent or globally in the South? And I would say, yes, probably there is. However, very few is happening at the moment. We've seen 1.7%. So in quantity, it remains very little. However, with very positive results because there's no inclusive models. But it remains an enduring model and paradigm that is being established on the continent. And this corporate model that is being developed and that is apparently the one only succeeding in these conditions is becoming the core or the dominant model out there, which make me say that we probably arrive at a tipping point with long-term marginalization being established, which will not be able to be returned afterwards. So change, yes, little, but structural, and certainly not where we wait or where the investors tend to promote where they should be. And it makes me say, or come back to my last strong point. I think there's a lack of long-term reflection on alternative development trajectories which are inclusive of sectors and actors and which define the roles of the different actors. By analyzing large-scale land acquisition, by contributing them, by analyzing more inclusiveness, etc., we also tend to forget there's alternative, more organic models of support of direct small-scale farming in the countries that would lead to more inclusiveness, to more organic development, and which should lead the different sectors and the different actors. By sectors, I say also the urban sectors, etc., because what are we going to do with a sector that is liberating its population from agriculture and that will then predominantly be urban? So it needs to be a holistic reflection on which development trajectory we should get into with the different actors. We can outsource investment to the private sector and to foreigners, but there's certainly a role to be played for local governments and the public sector in these investment patterns. Thank you very much.